Picture a room more beautiful than anything you've ever stood inside. Now understand that the beauty is a weapon, and it is aimed at you. Gold leaf on every surface. Mirrors that multiply the candlelight until the room seems to breathe fire. Silk curtains the colour of a bruise at sunset, heavy enough that even the draughts of a January palace can't move them. Flowers arranged in porcelain vases that cost more than a village earns in a year. The smell of beeswax candles and orange blossom water, and the faintest, sweetest corruption of cut roses already beginning to die in the heat of 100 flames. This is Versailles, the Palace of Versailles, the most expensive, most deliberate, most politically calculated building ever constructed on European soil, a machine disguised as a chateau, an instrument of control that looks from the outside like an act of worship. And you live here, have lived here for years, have a suite of rooms here, a position here, a name that people say with a certain careful emphasis, a name that could mean a dozen different things depending on who's saying it and what they want from you. You are the king's mistress. Or you were, or you might still be. That's the thing about being a royal mistress in the middle of the 18th century at the court of Louis XV of France. The position has no official end date. Nobody sends you a letter. Nobody rings a bell. Nobody stands up in the Hall of Mirrors and announces that the arrangement is concluded. You simply begin to notice certain things. The visits less frequent. The notes briefer. The long pauses where his eyes used to find yours across a crowded room now find someone else instead. You are 40 years old. In the court of Versailles, in the year 1752, that is not a death sentence. But it is a sentence of some kind. You're still deciding what kind. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I don't know if you're listening because you want to sleep, or because somewhere in the back of your mind you've always been curious about what it actually felt like to be one of those women history calls by a single name. The great ones. The ones who influenced wars, commissioned paintings, built libraries, ended careers with a word whispered in the right ear at the right moment. The ones history textbooks mention in the margins and biographers spend entire lifetimes trying to fully understand. Because the story you were probably told is the decorative version. The version where she was beautiful and clever and the king loved her and she wore magnificent dresses. That version leaves out the part where she was also terrified. Where she worked harder than any minister in that palace. Where she played a game with no rulebook against opponents who'd been watching her for years, waiting for the first real crack to appear. She was 40 years old, and she was not done yet. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open in the dark, not complete dark. There is never complete dark at Versailles. The chateau is too alive for that, too inhabited, too full of people who cannot sleep, or will not sleep, or are paid not to sleep. Through the heavy curtains comes a thin line of torchlight from the corridor. The guards change their positions at certain hours. You have learned to tell time by those sounds without ever seeing a clock. The particular rhythm of boots on marble. 2 guards becomes 3, becomes 2 again. It is somewhere around 5 in the morning. For a moment, half a second, you lie still and let yourself be nobody. Just a body in a bed. Just warmth and darkness and the smell of your own hair against the pillow. A smell that is surprisingly human in the middle of all this engineered magnificence. Rose water and the faintest trace of your own night sweat and the cedar smell of the sachets tucked into the sheets to discourage insects. Then it comes back. Everything it always comes back to. In the first thin moments of consciousness, before the day has had a chance to provide you with anything new to worry about. The king went to bed last night without you. You know this because you would have known if he hadn't. You know everything that happens in these corridors with the same instinct that a farmer knows the weather. You read this palace the way other people read books. The particular quality of silence in a hallway, the way a servant won't meet your eyes, the slightly too loud laughter of women who are pleased about something and trying not to show it. He went to bed without you. Again. That's the third time this week. You lie there for a moment longer and run the numbers. Not coin numbers. People numbers. The arithmetic of attention. How many times in the past month? How that compares to 6 months ago. A year ago. You've been doing this calculation for approximately 14 months, and the trend is clear in the way that only unpleasant trends are clear, with that horrible crystalline quality that won't let you pretend you're imagining it. You're not imagining it. You sit up. The room around you is extraordinary. Of course it is. Every room at Versailles is extraordinary, but this room has a particular quality that distinguishes it from the others, which is that it is yours. You chose the silk for the walls, a pale blue that makes the candlelight look warmer. You chose the writing desk of rosewood inlaid with brass, positioned near the window because you need the morning light to write clearly, and you write constantly. Letters and notes and memos and more letters. The endless correspondence of a woman who has spent 11 years building a network so dense and so carefully maintained that it functions whether she's paying attention to it or not. 11 years. You've been at this court for 11 years. You stand and your feet find the cold of the floor through the rug's warmth at the edges. You pad to the window and pull the curtain aside just slightly, just enough to see. The gardens below are dark and geometric and absolutely still in the pre-dawn, all those perfect rows of topiary and gravel paths and fountains that aren't running yet. In a few hours they will be full of people walking their small calculated walks, saying their small calculated things to each other, watching everything. But right now they're empty, and you stand there, 40 years old in a palace that has been your home and your prison and your stage and your battlefield for over a decade, and you allow yourself approximately 2 minutes of something that is not quite despair, but is adjacent to it. Something that lives in the neighbourhood of despair. Something with despair's cold smell and despair's particular hollow quality in the chest. 2 minutes, not more. You have learned, through long practice, to keep your grief very small and very controlled and very private. Public grief at Versailles is a vulnerability that will be located and used within the hour. The 2 minutes end. You let the curtain fall and turn back to the room, and you begin. The getting dressed at Versailles is not what you would call a private experience under normal circumstances. It is an event. It has participants. It has a structure and a hierarchy, and a set of rules about who touches what and in what order and who stands where. Even the women who surround you have rankings. First lady of the bedchamber, second lady, the women who hand you things, the women who hold the basin, the women who pin and lace and arrange and assess. But this is 5 a.m. and the household hasn't fully stirred yet, and so for this brief window you have a kind of privacy that doesn't exist later. Just your lady's maid, Marie, who has been with you for 9 years and knows everything about you that can be known from proximity and observation, and who has the remarkable quality of being excellent at her job while never making you feel watched. Marie is already awake. She is always already awake. You don't know when she sleeps or if she sleeps. She appears when you need her the way water appears when you open a tap, silently and completely and without explanation. The small fire, you say, and your voice comes out rougher than you'd like. Sleep still in it. Marie crosses to the fireplace and begins working at it. You sit at the dressing table and look at yourself. This is the thing they don't tell you about being a royal mistress at 40 years old. You can maintain everything, every possible treatment, every art and science of preservation that the 18th century has available to it. You can apply to your face and body with the rigour and consistency of a general running a campaign. You can bathe carefully and eat carefully and sleep carefully, and take your powders and your tonics and your waters, and use the creams that the physicians recommend, and the creams that the women at court swear by, and the creams that arrived last month from a supplier in Venice, who claims they contain something beneficial derived from the placenta of certain animals, which you applied once and then decided you'd rather not know more about. You can do all of this, and it works to a degree. You're not someone who looks 40 in the way that most women at this court look 40, which is to say, you are not yet invisible, not yet the kind of woman that eyes slide past without catching. But the mirror knows things. There is a line at the corner of your left eye that wasn't there 2 years ago, or if it wasn't that deep. There is a slight softening at the jaw that the right angle of light can minimize but not erase. Your neck still holds up well. Your hair is still remarkable, still the colour that it was when the king first noticed it across a hunting party. That particular shade of brown that goes copper in the candlelight, though Marie has become extremely skilled at helping it stay that colour. You look at your face, you look at it the way a general looks at a map, strategically, taking stock, assessing what you have to work with today. The face will do. The face will have to do. Bring the water, you say. Marie brings the basin, and the water is cold, genuinely cold, the kind of cold that comes from stone corridors and marble floors, and a building this large and this draughty that never fully warms until summer is properly established. You take a breath and press your hands into the cold water and bring it up to your face, cupping it against your cheeks, against your forehead, against the back of your neck. Cold water in the morning is a discipline. It clarifies the thinking. It reminds the body that it exists. It is also, according to every cosmetic authority you've consulted, better for the skin than warm water, which opens the pores and lets things in. Cold water closes everything down, keeps it tight, keeps it contained. This feels like a metaphor for something about your life right now, but you're too tired to follow it all the way to the end. The fire catches. The room begins to warm. Marie begins the business of your hair, and this is the part of the morning you can almost enjoy, because having your hair attended to has a soporific quality. All that careful pulling and pinning, the rhythmic weight of it, and if you close your eyes you can almost go back to sleep sitting up. You do not close your eyes. You think about the day. There is a reception this afternoon, the Duchess of something or other presenting her youngest daughter, all the ceremony and attention that attaches to such occasions, all the eyes and all the assessments. You will need to be present, and you will need to be perfectly composed, and you will need to wear the blue dress, the darker blue, not the pale one, because the darker blue does something to your colouring that the pale one doesn't. You worked this out 18 months ago during a reception that went slightly wrong, in a way you subsequently diagnosed as the fault of the wrong shade of blue. There is a meeting this morning with the library architect. The library is your project, your ongoing work, the thing that has given you occupation and purpose and genuine pleasure during the years when the personal situation has grown more complicated. You have been building the King's Library for 3 years, not building it with your hands, obviously, building it the way you build things when you are a woman at court with influence, but no official title, by identifying the right people, asking the right questions, deploying your knowledge of books and art and philosophy in ways that gradually make you indispensable to the project. The architect is talented but prone to the particular madness of talented men, which is a tendency to listen to his own ideas so loudly that he can't hear anyone else's. You have learned to bring him back to reality in ways that don't make him feel managed. This is an art. It takes patience and practice and a genuine interest in the work, which fortunately you have. There is a letter that needs writing. There's always a letter that needs writing. Your correspondence runs to 100 letters a month on the low end. You have a secretary for the official things, but the important letters you write yourself in your own hand with the full weight of your own particular way of phrasing things. A letter written in your hand means something different than a letter written by your secretary. People understand what it means. They understand the time and attention it represents. There is also, somewhere in the day, the question of the king. You think about this the way you think about a tooth that has been hurting, with a kind of careful, systematic attention, probing at it, trying to determine the exact location and nature of the problem before deciding what to do. The visits have thinned. This is fact. The question is whether this represents a fundamental change in the nature of your arrangement, or whether it represents a temporary variation that will self-correct if you are patient and don't make it worse by being seen to care. Being seen to care is the one thing you cannot afford. At Versailles, caring is weakness, jealousy is weakness, desperation is weakness. Any of those things, displayed publicly, will be used against you within hours. The court is an ecosystem that runs on weakness the way a fire runs on fuel. It is always looking for something to burn. You have spent 11 years not giving it that. You're not about to start now. Marie finishes your hair and begins on your face. The powder, the rouge, applied carefully, not heavily, the way the young girls do it. That feverish brightness that signals you're trying too hard. Just enough to give the cheeks their architecture back in candlelight. The beauty patch. The one small circle of black velvet that you've placed at the same spot by your left eye for years. By now as much a signature as your handwriting. You look at yourself when she's finished. Not beautiful in the way you were beautiful at 25. That particular beauty was partly just youth, which is a beauty that costs nothing and means nothing, and is gone before you've properly appreciated it. This is something different, assembled, intentional. The beauty of a woman who understands her own face well enough to work with it rather than against it. It will do. You stand. Marie helps you into the underdress, the stays, the petticoat. The dress itself comes last, the deep blue, and you stand for a moment feeling the weight of the silk against your arms, the slight constriction of the stays reminding your body to hold itself properly, and you are ready to begin. The corridors of Versailles in the early morning have their own quality. The light is different from the afternoon light, cooler, coming in at an angle from the windows that overlook the Cour Royale. The footsteps of servants echo differently when there are fewer of them. There is a smell to the morning corridors that you have never been able to fully identify, but have come to associate with the palace itself, something that comes from the stone and the paint and the wood and the decades of candle smoke and perfume and human occupation. Something that smells, if you were forced to characterize it, like ambition that has been let to age. You walk toward the private apartments and the various small encounters that constitute the beginning of every day here begin immediately. A gentleman whose name you remember bows to you, and his bow has a quality. Respectful, but with a slight elevation of the chin that wasn't there a year ago. a fractional adjustment in the angle. You note this. You do not react to it. You return a gracious nod and continue walking. Two ladies of the court are coming the other direction. One of them says something to the other as you approach, low and quick, and then they both look up with perfectly composed smiles, and you smile back, equally composed, equally warm, and you think about what was said in that low, quick moment, and you file it away with the thousands of other pieces of information you are always filing away, and you continue walking. The court is a library. Everything here is information. The angle of a bow, the warmth of a smile, the exact order in which people find reasons to speak to you or to avoid speaking to you. You've been reading this library for 11 years and you're very good at it. What it tells you today is the same thing it has been telling you for 14 months. Something is shifting. Something is not yet decided, but it is in the process of being decided. Your library is with the King's Library, because that is where you've arranged to have your meeting with the architect. And getting from your apartments to that room requires passing through certain corridors where certain things happen, and certain people are always positioned, and you note them all as you pass. The thing about being a royal mistress that no one explains in the romantic versions of the story is that it is a profession. It is work. It requires the same relentless attention and preparation and management that any demanding occupation requires, and the consequences of failing at it are severe in ways that most other professions don't threaten you with. You can lose everything. Not in the slow, recoverable way that most people lose things. Quickly. Completely. Your rooms, your income, your position, your access, your safety. The protection that comes from being near power disappears the instant you're no longer near power, and then all the people who are waiting for that protection to disappear have unlimited access to all the ways in which you've spent 11 years making enemies. Because you cannot hold this position for 11 years without making enemies. That is not possible. Every favour you asked for someone else denied someone else who wanted that favour. Every person you helped advance displaced someone who thought they should be advanced. Every piece of art you commissioned instead of another piece of art. Every building you advocated for. Every position at court you supported the appointment of. Every person you kept from an appointment they wanted. Every person you had removed from the king's inner circle because they were dangerous or corrupt or simply in the way. 11 years of decisions. 11 years of small and large acts of power, exercised carefully, exercised almost always with genuine attention to their effects, but still, 11 years of enemies. And if the king is losing interest, if the visits are really thinning out and not just varying, if the next few months bring what the 14-month trend suggests they might bring, then all of those enemies are going to be looking at you with a particular calculation in their eyes. The question that you are not going to allow yourself to panic about, but that sits in the back of everything, like a stone in the heel of a shoe, is this. What happens to you when he stops looking? Because women in your position do not have good options. You know this the way you know everything about this court, which is to say intimately, from direct observation of previous examples. You watched Madame de Mailly. You watched what happened when she was replaced and then replaced again, and then reduced to something barely visible at the edges of the same court where she had once been everything. You watched how quickly the people who had needed her for things stopped needing her. You watched how the room she'd occupied in the palace contracted, how the number of servants attending her contracted, how the quality of the invitation she received contracted, and all of it happening in that particular slow-motion way that court decline happens, where each individual thing is small enough to dismiss, and the cumulative effect is devastating. You're not going to be Madame de Mailly. You have spent 3 years making sure of this. Not 3 years waiting for the decline and then responding to it. 3 years building with the same energy and attention that you built everything else. Building a version of yourself that does not require the king's constant attention to function. Building a position at this court that is not only about the king. The library is part of this. The library matters because the library is real, because books are real, and ideas are real, and the people who love books and ideas are real, and they are everywhere in France right now. This extraordinary moment in French history, when the philosophers are producing the encyclopédie, and the salons are buzzing with new ways of thinking about the world, and you are at the absolute centre of all of that. Not as an appendage to the king's cultural patronage, but as a genuine participant in it, a woman who understands what Voltaire is trying to do, and can talk to him about it for 3 hours and hold her own, which she has done, in your actual drawing room, while the king was elsewhere doing other things. This matters. You believe it matters. You also believe that if the king was spending every night in your rooms again, you probably wouldn't be spending those 3 hours with Voltaire. There is something complicated in that thought that you're not going to unpack right now, because you're about to walk into a meeting about shelf dimensions. The library in question is not a room. It is a system. It is the beginning of what you hope will become one of the great collections of Europe, organized not by the old methods, by size of volume or date of acquisition, but by subject, by idea, by the connections between ideas, which is the way the philosophers have been arguing. Books should be organized for decades and which no one in an actual royal library has yet managed to implement. Because the people who run royal libraries are not philosophers, they are courtiers, and courtiers organize everything by precedent and status, and who was given the honour of donating which volume. Monsieur Leblanc is waiting for you outside the library. He is 34 years old, tall in an angular way, with the permanently distracted expression of someone who is thinking about load-bearing walls in the middle of conversations about other things. He has charcoal on his left hand, which he gets on his left hand every single day and apparently does not notice. And his coat is extremely good quality and extremely badly maintained, which you have come to understand is a consistent quality of architects of genius and not worth remarking on. "Madam," he says with a bow that manages to convey both genuine respect and a kind of gentle impatience. "Monsieur Leblanc," you say, "come." The room smells of new wood and plaster and the faintest smell of dust that has been disturbed. The shelves are going up along the east wall, the ones that will hold the natural philosophy collection, and Leblanc has redesigned the angle of their display surface 3 times in the past 6 weeks. Each redesign is genuinely an improvement on the previous design. This does not make the process less expensive. "The second section," he says, gesturing, "I've adjusted the depth, 4 inches less." Because 4 inches less means I can add a full additional shelf at the top, which gives us 240 more volumes on this wall alone. You look at the wall, you look at where the top shelf would sit, you think about who will be looking at this wall and whether they will be able to read the titles on a shelf positioned at that height without discomfort, and you think about whether it matters if they can't, because those top shelves will hold the least consulted volumes by design. The reference books and the older editions, and access to those is not the primary purpose. And you think about what 240 additional volumes means in terms of the collection you're trying to build, and you do the arithmetic in your head, not money arithmetic, though that's in there too, but space arithmetic. The arithmetic of how many shelves you have and how many you need and how far you still are from the shape of the thing you're trying to build. "Do it," you say. Leblanc nods, makes a mark in his notes. This is how your meetings go. He proposes. You assess. You decide. You move on. He has stopped trying to explain his technical reasoning at length, which is an adjustment that took about 6 months, and that you initiated not by asking him to stop, but by asking exactly the right questions and in exactly the right order, such that the technical explanations became unnecessary. He realized he was talking to someone who understood the implications of his decisions without needing them spelled out, and that realization changed how he talked to you. Most of the men you work with have had this realization eventually. Some of them find it pleasant. Some of them find it profoundly unsettling. LeBlanc is in the first category, which is why he is still here. You spend 40 minutes going through the plans. The north wall, which is proving problematic because of a window that was positioned before the room was repurposed, and that now occupies the exact space where you want shelving. The humidity question, the constant battle in any library between the desire for natural light and the destruction that natural light does to paper over time. The display case for the manuscripts, which needs glass, but the right kind of glass, not the cheap stuff that distorts. A question about the catalogue system, whether to use a single master catalogue or multiple smaller ones organised by subject. Multiple, you say. A single catalogue is a single point of failure. If it's lost or damaged or wrong, you lose access to everything. Multiple catalogues are redundant. They can correct each other. He looks at you with that particular expression that means he hadn't thought of it that way. And now he's thinking of it that way, and it's changing other things he thought he knew. I'll revise the furniture plans, he says, by Thursday. By Thursday. He goes. You stay in the library for a moment, alone with the smell of new wood and the beginning of something that will outlast everything else happening in this palace right now, possibly including the palace itself. This is what you know about legacies. After 11 years in a palace built for the manufacturing of legacies, the stone things last longer than the flesh things. The ideas last longer than the stone things. The books last longer than any of it. You built your way into this court on your beauty and your charm and your ability to delight a particular man, and all 3 of those things are real, and you don't regret any of them. But the thing you want to still be standing in 50 years is not the memory of what you were to him, it's the library. The morning has properly started now. The corridors are filled with the usual controlled chaos of a place where hundreds of people live and work and compete in close proximity. Servants moving quickly with loads that look impossible. Trays and baskets and armloads of laundry, keeping to the sides of the corridors, not meeting eyes. Courtiers moving more slowly and with much more elaborate intentionality. Because at this court, the manner in which you move through space communicates things about your status and confidence that are being read by everyone you pass. You move the way you've always moved here. Not quickly, which reads as anxious. Not slowly, which reads as either arrogance or elderly, depending on your age. At a particular pace that suggests purpose without hurry. That suggests a woman who knows exactly where she is going and is going there by choice. Your first real appointment of the morning is with the Marquis de Marville, who is one of those men who occupy positions at court that have slightly unclear functions but enormous actual influence. He is responsible for something involving the royal households, the administrative side of how Versailles functions, the budgets and the appointments and the 1,000 small decisions that keep this machine running. He also knows everything about everyone, and is one of the people who's been genuinely useful to you over the years in ways that you have genuinely reciprocated, which is the only kind of alliance that works long term. He is waiting in a small antechamber off the main corridor. He is 61 years old, grey-haired, with the face of a man who has spent decades carefully not showing what he thinks, and who has consequently developed a kind of permanent blankness that functions as its own kind of expression. "Madam," he says, rising. "Monsieur," you say. "Sit." He sits. You sit across from him. A servant who is definitely listening from behind the door to the adjacent room closes that door with deliberate care, and you understand that this antechamber is considered safe, which means that you and Marvel have both checked it and both remembered that it was checked. "How bad?" you say. He doesn't pretend not to know what you're asking. "Not catastrophic," he says. "Not yet. Not yet." The girl from the opera, the one who was presented in October. You know about this. You know about her. You have known about her for 4 months, and you have spent 4 months deciding how to respond to the information, which is to say you have spent 4 months deciding whether to respond at all, because responding is itself a choice with consequences. She is young, you say. She is 19. And she entertains him. She does. A pause. Outside, the muffled sounds of the palace morning. Boots, voices, the distant bark of a dog that belongs to one of the hunting party, and hasn't been returned to the kennels yet. He has not given her rooms, Marville says. No. He has not given her a title. No. He has not, as far as I can determine, done anything that constitutes a formal change in the arrangement. You look at him. You've known Marville for 9 years. You know what he is telling you, and you know what he is not saying. But, you say. But there are people, he says, who are watching with interest, and some of them are beginning to make certain assessments about the direction of wind, if you take my meaning. You take his meaning perfectly. The people who are watching with interest are the people who have been waiting for an opening for years. The religious faction which has never approved of you, and has made its disapproval clear in ways that range from cold shoulders to actual sermons preached against the influence of immoral women on godly kings. The group around the Dauphin, who is young and pious, and who has never liked you, and whose opinion of you has been carefully cultivated by people who saw in his dislike an instrument they could use. The various families with daughters of their own who would like a daughter positioned where you currently are. All of them watching, all of them doing their own arithmetic. And what do they conclude, you ask? That the arithmetic is uncertain, he says carefully. That it is too early to say definitively, but that it is not too early to begin making certain preliminary moves. Which preliminary moves? He looks at his hands for a moment. This is Marville's tell, the one he doesn't know he has, the one that means he's about to say something that he finds either uncomfortable or important, usually both. The appointment to the academy, he says. The one you supported last spring. Moreau. There is a campaign forming to have it reviewed. On what grounds? On the grounds that the selection process may have been influenced by factors external to merit. You hear this. You understand it precisely. Factors external to merit is the language of an accusation that doesn't quite dare to be an accusation. It is a way of saying, your influence was improper, without saying it directly enough that you can respond to it directly. Who is leading this campaign, you ask? He tells you a name. You recognize the name. Of course you recognize the name. You have known for 3 years that this person would eventually find a way to move against you. You have been managing that eventual move the way you manage everything, by keeping it in peripheral vision, by building your defences preemptively, by not giving it more attention than necessary because attention feeds things. I see, you say. It may come to nothing, Marville says, with the tone of a man who doesn't believe it will come to nothing. It may, you agree. A pause. There are also 3 social events in the next fortnight, he says, at which your attendance would be noted. Which 3? He tells you. You make a note of them internally, a note that goes into that large internal catalogue, alongside the angle of bows and the quality of smiles and the arithmetic of visits. I'll attend all 3, you say. He nods, rises. And Madame, he says, with the particular careful neutrality of someone choosing their words very precisely. The Library Project. I have heard very good things about it, from people who matter. From which people? From people who care about what France leaves behind. You look at him. Thank you, monsieur, you say. He bows. He goes. You sit for a moment in the antechamber, in the quiet, and you do not look upset or frightened or devastated, because there is no one watching right now but the servant behind the door, who is definitely still listening, and for the servant behind the door you arrange your face into something serene and purposeful, and then you stand and you go. The midday meal at Versailles is theatre with food. It is an event with seating arrangements that communicate complex hierarchical messages, with a choreography of serving and eating that has been refined over generations into something that looks like grace and functions like surveillance. You have attended hundreds of these meals. You know every detail of the choreography. You know who sits where and what that means, and which changes in seating since the last comparable occasion are significant and which are merely logistical. Today, you are seated where you should be seated. This is a relief. Quietly noted and quietly filed. Your position at the table is correct. No one has moved you yet. But you watch. The girl from the opera is not at this meal. She has not yet been given the kind of position that would bring her to a meal like this. She's still in the preliminary stage of whatever she is, a diversion or a beginning, too early to know which. You know that the king has spent time with her. You know what kind of time, and you know how much of it, and you know that it has a quality that is different from the kind of woman he simply sleeps with and forgets. She makes him laugh. This you have heard from 3 separate reliable sources. You think about this over your plate of something in a sauce that you eat mechanically, because food at court is always something to be managed rather than enjoyed. She makes him laugh. You think about what that means, and whether it means anything about you, and whether you're still making him laugh. Whether you were ever primarily making him laugh, or whether that was always a secondary thing. Whether what you gave him was something else. You gave him a home. That is what you actually gave him. You gave him a place where he could be less than the king, a person rather than a function, where the person behind the ceremony had room to exist. You are good at this. You are still good at this. You understood him in ways that most people at this court never have and never will, not because you are better than them, but because you paid attention of a quality and consistency that almost no one in this building can match. But she makes him laugh, and at 40 years old, surrounded by women in their 20s who are uniformly beautiful and uniformly ambitious, and who all understand exactly what kind of woman they are sitting near when they sit near you, you think about laughter. You think about what you had that was effortless at 25 and what has become crafted at 40, and you try to determine whether crafted is worse than effortless, whether the thing becomes less itself when you have to work at it, whether he can tell the difference between a woman being delightful and a woman performing delight. The woman to your left says something about the weather. which is the thing people say at these meals when they want to maintain the appearance of conversation without committing to any content. You respond about the weather. You do this beautifully, because you do everything beautifully at this table, the performance of ease and grace and composure, and you eat your sauce-covered something and drink your wine and watch the room from behind the perfect stillness of your expression. The afternoon brings the reception. This is the official event, the Duchess's youngest daughter, and you are present as you should be present, in the correct position, in the darker blue dress, with your hair arranged as Marie arranged it at 5 this morning and miraculously still holding its shape. The Duchess's daughter is 17 and terrified. You can see the terror because you know what it looks like under the face that girls are trained to show in rooms like this. The slight over-tightness around the eyes, the smile that is 1 degree too fixed, the hands that she keeps almost perfectly still, which is itself a tell, because completely still hands are hands that have been told to be still, and natural hands are never completely still. You smile at her with genuine warmth. You say her name correctly. You tell her that her dress is beautiful, which it is, a quite lovely rose colour that does something very good for her complexion, and you mean it in a way that she can hear you mean it, because you have long since stopped saying things you don't mean as a matter of policy, not because dishonesty troubles you philosophically, but because the energy it requires is energy you could spend on something more useful. The girl's terror eases about 10%. Her mother, standing nearby, watches you do this, and her expression contains a great deal that is not available for direct reading, but which you understand to include a complicated mixture of gratitude and wariness, and something that might be pity. You don't need her pity, but you accept it with the same grace with which you accept everything. The king is at this reception. Of course he is. This is his court, his palace, his reception. He is at every official event in the way that the sun is at every day, as a given, as the organizing principle around which everything arranges itself. He is standing 30 feet from you when you arrive, in conversation with a group of ministers, looking as he always looks in official settings, composed and slightly bored and aware of everything. He is 52 years old and handsome still, in the way that men who had remarkable looks in their youth sometimes remain handsome. Not the original beauty, but a version of it with more weight and more shadow and more lived-in quality. He looks up when you enter. His eyes find yours for a moment. Just a moment. Long enough to acknowledge. Then they return to the ministers. You have seen this happen hundreds of times. The look, the acknowledgement, the return to other business. You know its language perfectly. What it said today was not nothing. It was not actively cold. It was the look of a man who is comfortable with you being there, who is familiar with you, who has years of history with you sitting behind the look like sediment. But it was also the look of a man who returned to other business. You stand where you should stand. You say the things you should say. You smile the smiles you should smile. You are present and gracious and exactly as you have always been here, because any deviation from that would be the crack in the wall that everything waiting outside is watching for. The girl from the opera is not here, but her absence has a presence. The people who know about her are not looking at the space she would occupy, but there is a quality to the reception that is different from receptions a year ago, a very slight recalibration in where attention clusters, in what direction the small compass needles of court attention are pointing. They used to point at you. They're still pointing mostly at you. But mostly is doing a lot of work in that sentence, and you notice the gap between mostly and entirely with the same precision you notice everything. After the reception, you go directly to your desk. This is where you spend the late afternoon and early evening when the official day is concluded, and the unofficial day, the real day, the day that consists of correspondence and strategy, and the long, patient work of maintaining a position through intelligence and effort, gets properly underway. The writing desk is rosewood and brass, and positioned for the last of the daylight, which is now coming in at a sharp evening angle that makes the paper glow faintly gold. Your secretary, who is 23 and extremely competent, and who worships you with the fervour of someone who has just discovered what capable women look like up close, has arranged the letters in the order you've established. Urgent to the left, routine to the right, personal in the middle drawer. You open the middle drawer first, personal, because you need to know what's there before you can think properly about anything else. 2 letters, one from your brother, which you set aside, one from a woman in Paris whose salon you've been cultivating for 2 years because she knows everyone worth knowing, and because her opinion of you, formed through correspondence rather than proximity, has been useful in ways that court proximity doesn't allow for. You read this letter. It is a long letter, 4 pages in a close hand, and it is about Voltaire's new work, which she has read in manuscript and which she considers problematic in ways that she's laying out systematically and with real intelligence. She is asking your opinion. You put this letter down and you feel for the first time today something that is not strategic assessment or practiced composure. You feel actual interest, actual engagement with an actual idea. Voltaire's new work is something you have opinions about that are not simple. You have opinions about everything concerning Voltaire that are not simple, because the relationship between what Voltaire believes and what is politically possible, and what is genuinely true and what is beautiful is a complicated tangle that you have been thinking about for years. And thinking about it with someone as sharp as this woman is a pleasure that has no political calculus attached to it. You will write a proper response to this letter. Not tonight, because tonight you have other letters, but soon. You set it in the personal drawer and move to the urgent pile. 3 letters in the urgent pile. The first is from a publisher, concerning a manuscript you have been supporting. The author is young and not yet established, and has written something that is either brilliant or insane or both, and the publisher wants your opinion because your opinion carries enough weight that it can change his, not because you've asked for that influence, but because you've spent years exercising it carefully and honestly enough that it means something. You read the relevant pages he's enclosed. The manuscript is neither brilliant nor insane. It's competent and has one genuinely interesting idea buried in the middle that needs excavating from the surrounding prose, which is overwrought in the way that young writers' prose is overwrought when they're trying too hard to sound like the writers they admire. You make notes in the margin, actual notes, about the prose, about the structure, about the one good idea, and how it could be made to do more work. You write back to the publisher, support the author, tell him what to fix. You phrase this in a way that the publisher can give to the author without embarrassing anyone. This takes 40 minutes and you barely notice the time passing. The second letter in the urgent pile is about the Academy appointment, the one Marvell warned you about this morning. This letter is from a man who is nominally a friend but is also someone who operates in that grey area between ally and opportunist, where so many of the people in your life have always lived. He is warning you in the way that people at this court warn you, obliquely, with enough plausible deniability built in that if you brought the letter to anyone, it would read as mere gossip. You read it twice. You extract what is actually being communicated from what is ostensibly being said, which is a different letter. What it actually says is, things are moving faster than you think. The campaign against Moreau's appointment is already further along than I told you, and there's a council meeting next week where it may be raised. You file this away with everything else you're filing today, which is a great deal. The third urgent letter is something else entirely. It is from a young woman named Madeline. She is 24 years old. She arrived at court 4 months ago, attached to the household of a countess whose name everyone knows, and whose connection to you is genuine rather than merely courtly. Madeline is intelligent and beautiful in the way that 24-year-old women with some education and a great deal of ambition are sometimes beautiful, with that sharp-eyed clarity that hasn't yet learned to soften itself into strategic warmth. She came to you 3 months ago, through the Countess, with a request. She wanted advice about the court, about how to exist here, about the particular survival skills of a woman who is neither noble enough to command attention by birth, nor common enough to be invisible. You have given her advice before. You have done this for other women. It is a thing you have done carefully and without announcement, because advising other women is both something you consider genuinely important and something that has a complicated political dimension, because a woman known to advise other women is also known to accumulate influence in ways that make certain people uncomfortable. But Madeline's letter today is not a request for advice. It is a warning, dressed as a letter of friendship, but a warning. She's heard something. She's been in a position at an event you didn't attend to hear a conversation not intended for her, and she's heard a name associated with your name in a way that is not friendly. A specific name, attached to a specific plan, connected to the academy appointment business. You sit with this letter for a long time. Outside the window, the evening is settling over the gardens. The last light is going orange over the topiary, the fountains casting long shadows across the gravel paths. Somewhere below, 2 gardeners are having a quiet argument about something. Their voices too distant to make out words, but the shape of the argument clear from the rhythm of it. You think about Madeline, about what it cost her to write this letter, about who might have noticed her sending it, about whether the warning is accurate or whether it's the kind of helpful information that is itself a manipulation, someone using Madeline to deliver information that serves a purpose you can't yet see clearly. At Versailles, you always have to wonder this. It is one of the exhausting things about life in this place. Everything is potentially a message. Everything is potentially a move. Even genuine kindness has to be examined before you can be sure it's not a trap. You examine this letter. You think about Madeline as you know her, her character, her intelligence, her actual relationship to the people involved. You think about the information itself and whether it is the kind of thing someone would manufacture to mislead you, and you decide it's too specific and too risky to be manufactured. It's too easily disproved if you look. No one would take that risk. She's telling you the truth, which means the thing Marville warned you about this morning is not a future threat, it's a current one. You fold the letter, you put it in the drawer, you lock the drawer with the small key you keep on your person at all times, the one that looks like a piece of jewellery, and that is in fact a piece of jewellery, a pendant key on a gold chain, designed specifically to look like it belongs on a woman's necklace rather than guarding documents. You pick up the next letter. You do not rush. You do not run to the king's apartments. You do not start making frantic moves that will be observed and assessed and used against you. You read the next letter, and then the next, and then you begin writing responses with the unhurried quality of a woman who is exactly where she should be. doing exactly what she always does, in complete control of her situation. This is also a performance. But it is a performance that has been going on for 11 years, and that you have become so good at that, sometimes even you can't tell the difference. The thing about a palace is that it keeps its own time, which is different from the time outside its walls. Out there, in the countryside, in Paris, in the towns and villages and farms that make up the France you came from before all of this, time moves with the rhythms of seasons and work and the practical necessities of keeping a life going. Here, time moves with the rhythms of the king's schedule and the court calendar and the slow seasons of political favour, which have their own winter and spring, their own long warm summers and sudden sharp frosts. You've lived in palace time for so long that you've almost forgotten the other kind. Almost. You remember being 21. This is not self-indulgence or nostalgia. You call up the memory deliberately, the way you call up anything useful, because what you're trying to remember is specific. What it felt like to be 21 and arriving at Versailles for the first time. Not the arrival itself, the feeling, that particular quality of the world when you're new to it, when everything's still legible as information rather than having calcified into habit. You arrived knowing almost nothing and learned almost everything as fast as you could absorb it, and in that state of frantic learning, certain things became permanently clear. The way power actually works in a place like this, not the official architecture of it, the hierarchy and the titles and the formal positions, but the real architecture. Who actually decides? Who controls access to the person who decides? What being near power feels like in your body when you walk into a room, a warmth, a kind of amplification of yourself, a sense that your words will carry further and land harder and be remembered longer. And what the absence of that feels like. You have not entirely experienced the absence yet, but you have felt its edge, the slight cooling at the perimeter of things, the very subtle dimming. You're not going to let that progress. This is not about the king. This is a thing you need to be very precise about in your own mind, because if you make it about the king, it becomes personal, and personal things make you less able to think clearly about practical ones. What you are defending is not a relationship. What you are defending is a position you built and that you have occupied for 11 years, and that you have the right to hold for as long as you can manage to hold it, not by the king's continued romantic interest in you, which is a matter of his nature and your age, and 1,000 variables you cannot control, but by being genuinely indispensable. This is the strategy. It is the only strategy that works. Become indispensable, not as a companion which can be replaced, not as a lover which most certainly can be replaced, but as a mind, an advisor, a cultural force, a woman who has direct relationships with the artists and philosophers and architects and writers who are shaping what France looks like and what France thinks. A woman who has been making things happen in this court for 11 years and who has the accumulated reputation and knowledge and relationships that don't disappear because a king loses romantic interest. The library, the cultural patronage, the correspondence with half of intellectual Paris, the relationships with people who matter, the quiet, ongoing work of being someone who helps things get done that wouldn't get done without her. If she is those things when the romantic arrangement ends, which it will, then the ending is survivable. Then she keeps her rooms and her income and her influence and her life. Then the example she is not Madame de Mailly but something else, something without a clear precedent, a woman who turned a position based on the body into something that outlasts the body's usefulness. You have been working toward this for 3 years. You're not finished yet. The candles are lit now. Marie has been in and out, silently attending to the room, and the light has shifted from the cool evening blue of the window to the warm amber of the candles. Outside, the gardens are dark except for the torches that mark the main paths, those long lines of fire extending back toward the palace perimeter. You have been at your desk for 3 hours. You have written 7 letters. You have read 20. Your hand aches. The kind of ache that comes from gripping a pen for hours, a specific tightness in the muscle between your thumb and forefinger that you've been ignoring for the past year because there is no solution to it that doesn't involve writing fewer letters, which is not a solution. You flex your hand, press the fingers back gently. Feel the resistance in the joints. This is a new development, the hand. The body has been beginning to register the work of keeping itself going in ways that it didn't register at 30. Small catalogues of protest. The hand in the morning. The lower back in the afternoons when you've been standing at court events for too long. A tiredness that comes faster than it used to and that requires more deliberate management. You manage it. You go to supper. Supper is smaller than the midday meal, less formal, which means that the seating arrangements have slightly more flexibility and slightly less murderous implication. You eat carefully. You drink 1 glass of wine. You speak to the people you need to speak to, and you avoid speaking to the person you most need to avoid tonight, which is the woman who has been working against the Moreau appointment, who is also at this supper, who is also performing ease and composure in a way that you can read from across the room. She knows you know. You can tell this from the way she doesn't look at you, which is different from the way people normally don't look at you. Normal not looking is casual, the gaze sliding past as part of general conversation. Her not looking has an effort in it, a studied quality, the effort of a woman who has been told by herself that she is not going to look at that woman tonight and is working to maintain that commitment. You look at her once, directly, for just a moment. She feels it. You see the slight stiffening in her back. Then you look away and resume your conversation with the man to your left, who is telling you about his nephew's military career, and you attend to this with warm, genuine interest, because the nephew's military career is actually moderately interesting, and also because doing this gracefully is one of the weapons in your arsenal, and you keep it sharp. After supper, the evening. The evenings at Versailles have their own geography and their own rhythms. There are the official events, the gaming sessions and the concerts, and the formal entertainments that the court calendar requires. There are the unofficial events, the gatherings in private apartments, the card games and the music and the gossip, all the smaller social machinery of a place where hundreds of people live together and have to fill their evening somehow. And there is the king's evening. You do not go to the king's evening. This is a decision you make with a kind of deliberate clarity that costs more than you'd like to admit. You have been to his evening 3 times this week. The arithmetic of it, the balance between presence and need, between being somewhere and being seen to want to be somewhere, has been calculated with the same precision you bring to everything else. Tonight you go to the small gathering in the Duchesse de Chevreuse' apartments, which is a group of 8 people who meet informally to discuss the encyclopédie, the massive collaborative work that is being produced right now in Paris, the most ambitious intellectual project France has attempted in living memory. You have been supporting this project financially and intellectually for 2 years. The gathering tonight is to discuss the most recent volume, which covers natural philosophy and which has a section on medicine that has been causing controversy. The room is warm from the fireplace and smells of candle smoke and the coffee that someone has produced. An extravagance at this hour, and the 8 people in it are genuinely engaged with the ideas on the table, arguing about them with real passion rather than the performed passion of most court intellectual discussions, where the goal is to seem interesting rather than to think clearly. You sit near the fire. Someone hands you coffee. The pain in your hand eases slightly with the warmth. The discussion moves through the medical section of the encyclopédie and into a larger question about whether knowledge of the body changes moral responsibility, and you have opinions about this, genuine ones formed over years of thinking about it, and you offer them in the way you've learned to offer opinions in mixed company, not leading with the opinion itself, but with a question that opens the space for it, so that by the time you're actually saying what you think, you've already established that it's a response to something rather than a declaration. A man called Dupont, who is a mathematician, and therefore thinks everyone else is arguing imprecisely, challenges one of your points. He does this not unkindly, but with the brisk directness of someone who doesn't have the patience for diplomatic indirection. You respond directly. No indirection. Not in this room, not with these people, not when you're talking about something that actually matters to you. You tell him what you actually think, and why you think it, and where you think his counter-argument doesn't hold. He considers, nods, argues back. You go back and forth for 20 minutes, and it is excellent. It is one of the best 20 minutes of the entire day, possibly of the entire week, this back and forth with a mathematician who is taking you seriously as an interlocutor, and not performing taking you seriously, but actually doing it, actually bringing his full intelligence to the conversation because he respects yours. The group disperses around midnight. You walk back through the corridors toward your apartments, and the corridors are quieter now. The official day long ended, only the night servants and the guards and the occasional insomniac courtier moving through the candlelit dark. You are tired, not the strategic kind of tired that you manage with discipline, actually tired, the kind that gets into the muscles and behind the eyes, and that the coffee hasn't fully counteracted. You have been awake since before 5 this morning. You have spent the entire day in a state of high alert, reading everything, managing everything, performing everything. You have had perhaps 2 genuine moments today. The library planning with Leblanc and the argument with Dupont, where you forgot to maintain the performance and just existed inside an actual thing. 2 moments. That is not a lot. You reach your apartments. Marie is waiting. She helps you out of the dress, out of the stays, into the nightgown, an operation that in reverse took 40 minutes this morning, but in this direction takes less than 10, because undressing is always faster than dressing, and also because you are both tired and both know it. Marie unpins your hair. It falls to your shoulders with a weight that you feel all the way down your spine, the release of it, and you let out a breath. Anything else? Marie says. No, you say. Go. She goes. You are alone. The room is quiet. The candle on the windowsill burns low. The fire has been banked and gives off a steady warmth without much light, just a red glow from the coals that makes the room feel like the inside of something alive. You go to the window and look out at the gardens. They're completely dark now except for the torches. The geometric shapes of the topiary are barely visible, suggestions of form rather than form itself, and the fountains are silent and the paths are empty, and the whole enormous, deliberate, relentlessly controlled landscape outside looks, in the dark, like something slightly less certain of itself. You have a particular thought, that you have been refusing to think all day. You think it now. You think about being 40 years old, not as a number or as a strategic reality or as a thing to be managed, just as a fact. The actual fact of being the person you are in the place you are at this particular point in the arc of a life that has gone in directions you couldn't have predicted at 21. At 21, arriving here, you thought about this future. You thought about what this position meant and what it required and what it cost and what it gave. You thought about it clearly and without illusion, which was one of your qualities then as now, the refusal of comfortable fiction. You knew what you were doing. You chose it. What you couldn't fully know at 21 was what 40 would feel like. Not physically, though that's part of it, but the accumulated weight of it. The years of always being watched, always performing, always reading the room and reading the king and reading the court and reading your own face in the mirror for signs of change. The years of careful letters and careful conversations and careful silences. The years of building and maintaining and defending. You couldn't know that. You had to live it to know it. And now you've lived it. The question is not whether you regret it, because you don't exactly, in the way you don't regret things that were genuinely chosen and that gave you things of real value. The question is what comes next, not the next move, not the strategy. Those are handled. Those are being handled every day with the same care and intelligence you've always brought to them. What comes next for the person inside all of this? The actual person, the one who spent 20 minutes arguing with a mathematician tonight and felt more herself in those 20 minutes than in most of the day around them. You stand at the window for a long time. The palace breathes around you. Hundreds of people sleeping or trying to. Hundreds of small fires burning low in hundreds of rooms. The guards pacing their circuits. The night servants doing their night servant things. All of it running. All of it continuing. You have been part of this machine for 11 years. And you will be part of it for however long you can manage to remain part of it, and eventually you will not be part of it, and whatever comes after that will be something you will have to learn from scratch, the way you learned this from scratch, which is to say, by paying attention. You can do that. You are very good at paying attention. The candle gutters and catches. You turn from the window. You go to bed. The bed is large and extremely well made in the way of all beds at Versailles, the mattress deep and the linen fine and the canopy above doing its quiet work of keeping the warmth in and the draughts out. You've slept in this bed for 9 years. You know its particular topography as well as you know your own face, the place where the mattress is slightly softer on the left side, the way the pillow smells of the lavender sachets tucked into the case, the sounds the bed makes when you first lie down, small private sounds, settling, accommodating. The church bells from the chapel ring the half hour, then silence. You lie on your back for a while, then on your side. The fire glows red in the grate. The single remaining candle on the mantel burns with a very small and steady flame. You think about tomorrow, the letter to write the woman in Paris about Voltaire, the response to the publisher about the young writer's manuscript, the follow-up with Marvell about the Academy appointment situation, which will need a decision about whether to move proactively or to continue waiting. The third event on his list of 3, which is 2 weeks away, for which you need to decide what to wear. The library, Leblanc and his top shelf, the 240 additional volumes, the king. You will see the king tomorrow at the official morning reception. You will see him with the same composure and warmth and practiced ease that you always present. You will not press for a private conversation because pressing is the wrong move. You will be there, and you will be fully present, and you will be every version of yourself that he fell in love with 11 years ago. Not performing those things, but genuinely being them. Because the performing and the being have been indistinguishable for so long now that the distinction has stopped being useful, and he will either look at you the way he used to look at you, or he won't. And if he doesn't, then tomorrow night you will lie in this bed and think about what that means, and you will do the arithmetic, and you will make the next decision. One day at a time, one very careful, very long, very exhausting day at a time. The candle on the mantel is burning low, the small flame wavers, the shadows on the ceiling move. Outside, the palace breathes. You think about the library. You think about it in the specific way you think about it when you need something to hold on to, which is to think about a particular shelf of books, and what is on it, and what those books represent, and what they will still be representing in 100 years when all of this, the court and the politics and the careful arithmetic of royal attention, is history. Long, strange, difficult to understand history. The books will be there. The ideas in them will be there. The things you helped build and supported and fought for. The artists you commissioned and the writers you backed and the thinkers you put your name behind. Those things will be there in the way that things made of thought are there, persistent past the particular humans who made them possible. This is what you are building. Not just survival, not just the maintenance of a position, something real. The flame on the candle goes down. The room darkens. The fire in the grate is almost out, just the faintest glow in the coals. The palace is very quiet now. The depth of the night after midnight before the gradual return of sound that comes with the earliest morning. The hours when the building is as close to sleeping as it ever gets. You close your eyes. The day passes through you in pieces. The reception. Marville. The letter from Madeleine. Leblanc and his 240 volumes. Dupont and his mathematical precision. The angle of bows in the morning corridor. They drift. They lose their edges. You are very tired. You've been very tired for some time, if you're honest about it, which you are. Here in the dark, where there's no one watching. The kind of tired that doesn't come from one day, but from many of them, stacked up. The kind that gets into the bones and stays there. The kind that rest alone doesn't entirely fix, but rest helps. Rest is available now. You've earned it. The fire goes cold. The candle goes out. The room is dark and warm, sealed against the corridors and the politics and the long corridors of other people's ambitions. Just this. Just the warmth of the bed and the weight of the blanket and the sound of your own breathing, which is slow now, slower. Somewhere in the palace, very distant, the chapel bells ring the next quarter hour. This sound comes through the walls like something heard underwater, muffled and then gone. You turn on your side, the pillow cool against your cheek. You're 40 years old, and you've been awake since before 5 this morning, and you've read 40 letters and written 7 and argued about the encyclopédie, and looked at your face in the mirror and done the arithmetic of visits and stood at the window in the dark. You have done all of that, and you are still here, still in this room that you chose and that you still occupy, still the woman that you've spent 11 years becoming. That is something. The cold at the window, the warmth of the bed, the scent of lavender and cedar and old beeswax. Your thoughts are very quiet now, less thoughts than images. The fountain garden in the dark, the shapes of things, the light on Leblanc's charcoal-stained hand, the expression on Marville's face when he looked at his own hands, the girl from the opera who makes him laugh, and who is 19, and who doesn't yet know what she is stepping into. You don't wish her ill. This is a genuine thing about you, not a performance. You don't wish any of them ill. The women who circle the same centre, drawn by the same gravity, working the same calculations, they are doing what they can with what they have, same as you. Same as everyone here. All of it drifting now. The chapel bells are very far away. The palace is almost entirely still. In the morning you will get up before 5 and Marie will bring cold water and you will look at your face and go to work, but that's the morning. Right now there is only this, the breath going slower, the thoughts going softer, the warmth, the dark, the almost silence of a sleeping palace. Let it come. Let the mind release the calculations it's been running all day. Let the letters go unanswered for a few hours. Let the arithmetic of eyes and bores and the angle of royal attention rest until morning, when it will all be waiting exactly where you left it, patient as furniture. You are warm enough, safe enough, still yourself. You have built things that will outlast the building you are sleeping in. You have thought thoughts worth thinking. You have spent today the way you have spent every day here, with the full application of everything you are. That is enough. Let the night do its work. Let sleep take you the way it takes everyone, without hierarchy and without ceremony, the great leveller that doesn't care whether you're the king or the woman who loved him, or the girl who might replace her, or the guard outside the door. Sleep comes for all of them. It comes for you now. The sounds of the palace grow fainter. Or perhaps you are the one growing distant, falling slowly inward, away from the corridors and the candles and the careful calculations, and towards something older and simpler, and entirely your own. The weight of the blanket, the dark behind your eyes, the very slow, very quiet rhythm of rest. Centuries will pass. This palace will become a museum. The corridors you walk every day will be walked by tourists with headsets, standing in the spot where you stood, looking at the spot where the king stood, reading a small placard that will give them 3 sentences about the women who lived and worked and fought for their lives here. 3 sentences if they're lucky, but the books will still be there. Some of them. The ideas in them still alive, still being thought by people who have no idea who helped them survive. The library. In the dark, the thought of it is very simple and very warm, something that will last. You helped build it. That's yours. Permanently and irrevocably yours, no matter what happens next, no matter which way the winds of a particular king's attention blow in the coming months. You built it. Sleep now. The palace breathes around you, slow and deep. The night outside is very still. Tomorrow will come when it comes, with its letters and its audiences and its arithmetic and its long, careful performance of being exactly who you need to be, in exactly the right room at exactly the right moment. But that's tomorrow. 3 days pass. 3 days in which nothing happens and everything happens, the 2 things being not as contradictory as they sound, because at Versailles the absence of things is always a kind of event, the absence of a visit, the absence of a note, the absence of a particular look across a room that used to be as reliable as weather. You count the 3 days the way you count everything, precisely and without drama. You go to the morning receptions, you attend the official meals, you write your letters and meet with Leblanc, who has begun work on the 3rd section of shelving, and who has decided, without consulting you, that the wood needs a different finish than the one you agreed on, a decision you discover on Wednesday morning when you arrive to find the shelves being treated with something that smells wrong. You stop the work. You have a conversation with the craftsman who is applying the finish. He explains his reasoning. His reasoning's not wrong technically. but it doesn't account for the light in this particular room at this particular hour. And if you apply that finish to these shelves in this light, the room will have a quality you don't want. A heaviness, something that makes the books look stored rather than presented. You explain this. The craftsman listens with the expression of a man who is trying to determine whether the woman explaining things to him actually knows what she's talking about. You keep explaining specifically about light angles and reflective surfaces and the way the eye reads depth in a room, and at some point the expression shifts from assessment to understanding. He stops the work. You send a note to Leblanc about the finish. Leblanc sends back a note that is 1 sentence long. You are correct. Apologies. You have a very small, very private moment of satisfaction that belongs entirely to you. Then you go back to managing the rest of the day. On Thursday, you see the king at a dinner. This dinner is official and complicated, a diplomatic event involving representatives from a foreign court, and the seating arrangements have been determined weeks in advance, with the usual meticulous attention to precedence that these occasions require. You're seated 4 places down from where he sits, near enough to see his face clearly, far enough that you're not in his immediate orbit. This is not an accident. You understood when you saw the seating arrangements that this placement was the result of a decision made by someone in the planning of this event. 4 places is not 15 places. You haven't been moved to the margin, but you haven't been placed close either. You eat your dinner. You speak to the man on your left, who is one of the foreign representatives and who is nervous and slightly lost in the ceremony of a French royal dinner, and you make him feel at ease by asking him about his country in ways that demonstrate you know something about it, which you do, because you have always believed that knowing things is the most useful habit available to a person in your position. He relaxes. He becomes animated. He tells you about the particular architecture of his capital, a city you've only seen in engravings, and as he talks about it, you ask the questions that open up more of the story rather than closing it down. And by the end of the soup course, he is telling you things he probably wasn't planning to tell anyone at this table. You listen to all of it. You store all of it. You're also simultaneously aware of the king, not looking at him, not directly, but aware. He's talking to the woman to his right, who is the wife of a minister, and who is efficient and pleasant and entirely unremarkable. He seems comfortable, not particularly animated, the dinner table version of him, engaged but not delighted. You have sat near him at hundreds of dinners. You know the gradations. And then, at some point during the 3rd course, he looks up. He looks down the table, past the people between you, and his eyes find you. You're listening to the foreign representative who is now describing a festival in his home city with genuine enthusiasm, and you are smiling at something he said. And when the king's gaze arrives, you don't look up to meet it because you're genuinely in the middle of a conversation, and also because not looking up immediately is the right move. You let 2 or 3 seconds pass. The foreign representative says something further. You respond, and then you let your gaze drift naturally in that direction, as if simply taking in the table, and you meet the king's eyes. He is looking at you with an expression that you cannot entirely read. This is unusual. You have spent 11 years reading his expressions across rooms, across tables, across the width of a dance floor, and you are very good at it. But this look has something in it that you can't immediately categorize. Not coldness. There's warmth in it. But the warmth has a quality of looking at something from a slight distance. The warmth of memory rather than the warmth of present desire. The warmth you might feel looking at a place where something good happened to you, rather than the warmth of the thing happening. You hold his gaze for a moment. You let your expression be warm and calm, and you don't let any of the calculations show. The 48 hours of careful thinking that has gone into being exactly this woman, at exactly this table, in exactly this expression. He looks back to his dinner. You look back to the foreign representative. The meal continues. You do not cry. You're not going to cry at a state dinner. You're not going to cry anywhere where someone might see you. But the thing you felt in the 2 seconds of that look, the thing you feel now, careful, precise, noting it like everything else you note, is grief. Real grief. Not the strategic adjacent to despair thing from 3 days ago. Actual grief. For something that is not yet gone, but that you can see going, and the seeing of it going is its own kind of loss. The way you can grieve the end of something while it's still technically ongoing. You loved him. This is also something you permit yourself to think precisely and without decoration. Here in the middle of this dinner with its 5 more courses to go, and its foreign representative who wants to tell you more about his country. You loved him. Not in the pure, uncomplicated way that people in stories love each other, in the complicated way that involves an enormous power differential and 11 years of living inside that differential and knowing always what the arrangement actually was. But within all of that, genuinely, the actual person, the one who existed on the other side of the king. He was not always easy to love. He was sometimes impossible to love. He was also sometimes, in the small private spaces of this long arrangement, very specifically himself in ways that nothing and no one at this court required him to be. And those moments were real, and what you felt in them was real. And the look across the dinner table means that those moments are becoming the past instead of the present, and this hurts. You take a very quiet breath. You smile at the foreign representative. He's still talking about the festival. You ask about the music. The dinner ends 2 hours after it began. You say your goodbyes with warmth and precision, and you walk back through the corridors with the same purposeful, unhurried quality you always walk with. And you go to your desk and you write 3 letters, and then you go to bed. Sleep comes slowly tonight. You lie in the dark and you let yourself feel the grief in full, because it is only in this room, in this dark, that you permit it. Here it is allowed to exist in its actual size. Outside this room it must stay small and controlled and private. In here it is large. You are his, in whatever complicated sense of that word applied to your situation. You were, for a long time, his favourite thing about his life. He told you this. Not directly, because he did not speak directly about things that mattered to him, which was one of his qualities that took you years to understand and that, once understood, explained a great deal. But he told you in the ways available to a man who cannot say the important things plainly, in the way he talked to you about things he didn't talk to anyone else about, in the way he came to your rooms when he was unhappy and didn't say why, and you didn't ask why, but simply made the space around him different, less formal, less performative, and watched the unhappiness ease. You were good at that. You were very good at that. He may not fully know how good you were at it, because the nature of the thing meant it happened invisibly. You never told him what you were doing. You never said, "I'm making this easier for you." You just made it easier, and he felt the ease, and he came back. Now he comes back less. And there is a girl who makes him laugh. And you are 40 years old in the dark, and the grief has its actual size. You let it be that size until it starts to shrink on its own. This happens around the second hour. The quality of the grief shifts from sharp to dull, the way the sharpest things do eventually, and you breathe with it, and the dull thing becomes manageable, and the manageable thing becomes quiet, and the quiet becomes sleep. In the morning you wake at 5 as always and you go to work. The confrontation comes, as confrontations at Versailles always do, sideways, not directly, not in the form of a conversation announced in advance and conducted openly. It comes in the form of an encounter in a corridor that is arranged to look accidental. You know it is arranged because the corridor in question is not one that this woman would have occasion to be in at this hour for any reason that makes natural sense, and because she is dressed for the encounter in a particular way, not in morning undress, not in full official attire, but in something in between that suggests a person who has prepared for something without wanting to appear to have prepared for something. Her name is Madame de Vaufour. She is 45. She has been at this court for 15 years, which means she was here before you, which means she's been watching you for 11 of them. She's attached to the household of a powerful family whose fortunes have been intertwined with yours in complicated ways, sometimes allied, sometimes competitive, always carefully managed. She is the one who is leading the campaign against Moreau's appointment. She is the name Marville gave you. She stops when she sees you. A performance of surprise that is just slightly overdone. Madame, she says. Madame de Vaufour, you say. Warm. Perfectly warm. A pause. The corridor around you is not empty, which is by design, because confrontations at Versailles require witnesses. They require the presence of people who can report accurately on what was said and what was not said, and what each woman's face was doing. I understand, she says, with a particular careful indirection of someone who has planned what they're going to say, that there has been some discussion about the Academy appointment. Has there, you say? Even warmer. A review, perhaps, of the process. She looks at you with eyes that are assessing and intelligent, and that she is trying very hard to keep friendly seeming. These things should always be above reproach, don't you agree? Entirely, you say. The Academy's integrity is essential. Exactly. A pause. One hears that the original appointment may have been made on the basis of factors that are, she chooses her word, personal. You look at her. You look at her with the specific quality of gaze that you have spent 11 years developing, which is a gaze that communicates, entirely without expression, that you hear everything being said and everything being left unsaid, and that you are not frightened. I'm sure the review, if there is one, will be thorough, you say. Monsieur Moreau is an exceptional scholar. His work speaks for itself. I have confidence in the process. This is a sentence that seems to concede something, and actually concedes nothing, and she knows this, and the knowing of it tightens something around her eyes. Of course, she says. And you say, with such genuine warmth that it can only be read as an attack. I understand your nephew has been presenting his work to the society. How is that progressing? The nephew is the reason she's doing this. You know this. He wanted the appointment that Moreau received, and he didn't receive it because his work is not as good as Moreau's work, and this is a fact that you know, and that she knows you know, and you have just said it, in perfect warmth, in a corridor with witnesses, in a sentence that is made entirely of implications, and that she cannot respond to directly without confirming everything. She smiles. It is a genuine smile in that it is the smile of someone who has just been outmaneuvered and is taking a moment to reassess. Very well. Thank you, she says. I'm so glad to hear it, you say. You continue down the corridor. Your heart is beating slightly faster than normal, the kind of fast that comes from adrenaline, from the body's response to conflict, even when the conflict is conducted in perfectly modulated tones and perfect silk and complete social composure. You let the extra heartbeat happen, and you keep walking. 2 days later, through Marville, you learn that the campaign against Moreau's appointment has been quietly shelved. No review, no council meeting. You do not gloat. You file it away and you move on. The library progresses. Leblanc has adopted the correct finish. The east wall shelving is complete and has been loaded with the Natural Philosophy collection, 412 volumes arranged by subject, and then by date of publication within subject, so that you can follow the development of an idea through time by reading the titles left to right. This was your idea, and it is working the way you thought it would. The book's becoming a kind of argument, each one in conversation with the ones before and after it. You spend an hour in the library on Friday afternoon, just you and the books and the autumn light coming in at the angle that the window's position creates, which Leblanc correctly identified as a problem, and which you correctly identified as a feature, because that angle of light, hitting the spines of the Natural Philosophy collection at 4 in the afternoon in October, creates something extraordinary, a warmth and a depth that makes the books look like they are illuminated from within. You stand in this light, and you feel something that is not strategic and not grief, and not the careful management of anything. You feel glad, simply and specifically glad to be in this room, with these books, in this light. This is also real. This also belongs to you. These feelings of genuine gladness at the things you've made and supported and helped come into being, they belong to you in a way that nothing anyone in this palace can take from you. Because they are not about position or proximity or the arithmetic of a particular man's attention. They are about what you find valuable and interesting and worth your time. You spend the hour. You read 12 pages of a natural history text that you haven't read before, a section about the classification of insects that is written with such precision and such obvious delight in its subject that you keep going back and rereading sentences just to feel how well they're put together. Then you close the book and go back to work. The king leaves for a week. This is not unusual. He hunts, he travels to other residences. He has the particular wandering quality of a man who rules everything, and is sometimes tired of looking at what he rules. He goes to a smaller hunting lodge 2 days' ride from Versailles, with a reduced court, a carefully selected group of companions and servants and officials. You're not invited. You have not been invited for 6 months. The first time you were not invited, 4 months ago, you noted it with care and you spoke to Marville about it, and you considered your options and you arrived at a decision, which was to not make an issue of it, not request to be included, not draw attention to the exclusion by reacting to it visibly. A woman who complains about being left behind is a woman who has already lost something. A woman who proceeds with her life as if the temporary absence of one person from it is simply the temporary absence of one person is a woman who still has ground. So when the court reduces itself and climbs into its carriages, and the usual Saturday procession of people and horses and luggage moves through the gates of Versailles in the direction of the hunting lodge, you stand at your window and you watch it go, and you feel the complex mixture of things that you always feel at this sight, the grief and the freedom and the relief that comes with the absence of performance, even when the thing that requires the performance is also the thing you would choose over its absence. And then the carriages are gone and Versailles is quieter, and you sit down at your desk and you work. The week alone is, if you were honest, something you need, not a vacation, not a rest in any conventional sense, but a week in which the density of performance is lower, in which you can exist in the palace on your own terms without the constant pressure of his presence and his absence, and the assessment of where you stand in relation to both. A week in which the court that remains is smaller and more manageable, and in which the people who remain are, by the nature of who stays when the main party travels, people who are genuinely interested in things other than proximity to power. The scholars stay, the artists stay, the architects stay, the librarians and the secretaries and the people who actually make the cultural projects of this palace happen stay, because they have work to do that doesn't travel to hunting lodges. You throw a dinner. You have thrown this dinner every time the main court has travelled for the past 2 years. It is not official. It has no particular ceremony attached to it. It is 12 people in your apartments around a table, and the 12 people are the most interesting 12 people you can assemble from those remaining at Versailles, and the food is good, and the wine is good, and the conversation is unpoliced. No one at this dinner is performing. This is the thing that distinguishes it from every other dinner at this palace. No one is manoeuvring for position, or if they are, they're doing it with the specific pleasure of people who enjoy the game itself, rather than needing the outcome. The artist talks to the philosophers. The architect talks to the mathematician. The young woman from the library staff, who has opinions about classification systems that are genuinely radical, and that she normally doesn't get to express in official settings, gets to express them, and the mathematician finds them interesting, and by the end of the evening they have agreed to correspond about it. You sit at the head of your table, and you watch this happen, and you feel the gladness again. The same quality of gladness as the afternoon in the library with the books and the light. This is also what you've built. Not just the library. This, the room where the ideas can happen. The table around which the people who are making France think can sit and say what they actually think to each other. Nobody writes this in the history books. The role of the dinner table, of the created space, of the woman who assembled the 12 right people in the room with the good wine, and then got out of the way of what they needed to say to each other. It happens anyway. It matters anyway. One of the guests stays after the others leave. His name is Jean Honoré. He is a painter. He is 29 years old, and he is producing work that is extraordinary. You have known this for 3 years, since you first saw a canvas of his in the studio of a painter you were visiting on other business, and stopped dead in front of it and stood there for 10 minutes, working out why it was extraordinary, and arriving at an answer that satisfied you. He has been painting a portrait of you for 8 months, not the official portrait. There's an official portrait, has been for years, the formal seated image in the formal dress with the formal expression, which is fine and accurate and completely empty of the person it depicts. This is something different. He's been painting you at your desk, a small canvas, a private thing, commissioned by you rather than by any official body, paid for out of your own accounts. The painting shows you in the position you occupy at your desk for hours every day, slightly turned toward a book, the light from the window on your left hand and your face in 3/4 view, and you look like exactly who you are. Not beautiful in the formal sense, not ornamental. Present, engaged, inhabited by your own thought. He's been trying to get the hand right for 3 months. The writing hand, the right one, holding the pen, and the thing he's been trying to capture is the specific quality of a hand in the middle of working rather than at rest. The slight tension in the fingers, the angle of the wrist, the way the hand knows what it's doing so completely that the knowing is in the body and not in the concentration on the face. Tonight he tells you he has gotten the hand. Finally, he says, not as a complaint, with relief. Let me see. He brings out the small canvas which he carries everywhere, and you look at it in the candlelight. The hand is right. You look at it for a long time. You look at the hand you've been looking at your whole life, your own hand, rendered by someone else with that specific quality of seeing that makes the familiar strange and the strange perfectly true. Yes, you say. He nods. He looks at the canvas himself, the critical looking of a painter who is still in the middle of a thing and can't yet see it as finished. 2 more sessions, he says. The background and something in the eye. Something in the eye. The specific quality of attention. He pauses, searching for the word. It's almost right. Not quite. You look at him. You look at this young painter who is trying to capture the quality of your attention on a canvas 8 inches wide, and you feel a particular kind of grateful, the kind that has no action attached to it. That is simply its own feeling, the gratitude of being seen accurately by someone who's seeing you respect. 2 more sessions, you say. He goes. You look at the canvas for a moment longer. Then you put it carefully in the drawer where it lives between sessions, the deep drawer of the rosewood desk, and you go to bed. The week passes. You read. Not strategically, not for information, not as research for any particular project. You read for the reading, for the pleasure of moving through someone else's thought. You read a new novel, a philosophical one that is disguised as a story about a woman who leaves her husband and then spends the next 400 pages thinking about what she thinks, which is formally interesting and occasionally brilliant and sometimes slightly exhausting in the way that novels by people who are primarily philosophers sometimes are. You read 3 essays about natural philosophy, and 1 very long and precise treatise about the classification of marine life, which is not a subject you'd have predicted interesting you, and which turns out to be completely fascinating. Something about the precision of the categories and the way they reveal how much the world contains that we have not yet named. You walk in the gardens in the mornings, which you almost never do when the full court is present, because the gardens when the court is present are another room of the performance, watched and walked with care. Now they are almost empty. The gardeners work at their endless work, raking and clipping and hauling, and they nod at you with a friendly familiarity that the household servants never permit themselves, and you nod back, and the cold morning air smells of turned earth and something damp and green, the smell of a garden in late autumn preparing for its winter, and you walk. Your hand aches. You've been writing more, longer letters, the week giving you space to write the letters that need time and thought, rather than the usual quick responses to urgent business. The letter to Paris about Voltaire, which turned into 12 pages that you enjoyed enormously. A long letter to a natural philosopher in London, whom you've been corresponding with for a year, and who has been working on a problem in optics that you've been following with genuine interest. A letter to your brother, which is always complicated and always necessary, and which this week you wrote with more care than usual, because the week has given you the kind of emotional space that makes care possible. Your brother is 4 years older than you and has lived the whole of his adult life in the village where you both grew up, and his letters to you have a quality that nothing else in your world has, which is the quality of being written by someone who knew you before all of this, who knew you as a child, who carries the memory of who you were before Versailles shaped you into who you are. He doesn't fully understand what your life is. He understands it in the way that someone understands a foreign country they've only read about, as a series of facts and impressions that don't fully cohere into lived experience. But he asks about it with genuine curiosity and without judgment, which is rare enough that you treasure it. You tell him about the library. You tell him about Leblanc and the shelves. You tell him about the discussion with Dupont about the encyclopédie. You do not tell him about the arithmetic of visits, or the girl from the opera, or the look across the dinner table, a sentence about the way the light looks in the orchard in October early morning, which he writes about with a directness and lack of self-consciousness. That is the most beautiful piece of writing you've encountered this week, better than the novel. You read that sentence several times. Then you put the letter with the others you keep. The court returns. You hear the carriages before you see them, the clatter of horses and wheels on the gravel of the main courtyard, the organised commotion of a large group of people and their luggage arriving home. You're at your desk when they return, and you do not go to the courtyard to greet anyone. You continue writing until you finish the letter you're in the middle of. Then you seal it. Then you stand and arrange yourself and go to be present in the way that being present is required. The palace redensifies. The corridors fill. The noise returns. The particular quality of Versailles when all its parts are occupied. That humming aliveness, the sense of a machine running at full capacity. You move through it with ease of long practice. The king looks well. He has had a week of hunting, which is what he looks like when a week of hunting has been good, a colour in his face, an ease in his bearing. He looks like a man who's been briefly free of being the king, and the brief freedom has restored something. He looks at you when he sees you, and the look is warm, genuinely warm. Not the distance with warmth of the dinner, but something more familiar, more present. "You look well," he says. They're standing in a group of other people, and this conversation is being observed. "The week was productive," you say. "The library is coming along." "I've heard." Something in his face that might be fondness. "I've been told the east wall is finished." "It is. You should see it." "I will," he says, and then he moves on, absorbed by the returning business of his court, and you are absorbed by yours, and the conversation is over. You hold what he said, you examine it, the tone of it, the quality of the fondness, not gone, not cold, not the look across the dinner table, but also not what it was. Fond the way people are fond of things that have become comfortable rather than urgent. The way you are fond of a chair that fits your particular body, not with excitement, but with the warmth of something that belongs in your life without needing to be justified. You are being kept, not in the romantic sense, not in the financial sense, though that's also true. In the larger sense, he is keeping you here. You are not being dismissed. The arrangement is not ending. The rooms, the income, the position, none of that is changing. But the quality of the arrangement is changing, has been changing. The romantic urgency of it, the thing that was its original basis, is becoming the fond familiarity of long habitation, and the direction that moves in over time is a direction you cannot stop. What you can do is what you've been doing. The library, the letters, the dinners. The philosopher and the mathematician correspondent about classification systems. The painting of your hand in the light. What you can do is make yourself so genuinely, substantively real in this palace that your continued existence here is not about his attention but about your own purpose. This is not comfort exactly. It is something more true than comfort, and harder to hold on to, and more worth holding on to. You go to see Jean Honoré. He is in the space he uses as a studio, a room in the less official part of the palace that he has occupied for 2 years, and that smells of linseed oil and turpentine, and the particular dry smell of paint at various stages of drying. The smell hits you before you open the door, that sweet, sharp chemical quality, and you've come to associate it with the specific pleasure of the 2 hours you spend here every few weeks. The canvas is on the easel. You look at it as you sit in the position you've been sitting in for 8 months. The chair turned slightly left, the book at the angle, the hand in the gesture. You've been doing this for long enough that the position is automatic now, your body finding it without instruction. He looks at you for a long moment before he starts. This is something he does. This preliminary looking, not studying you for the purposes of the painting, though that's also happening, but something else. The looking of a painter who is trying to see what's actually in front of him rather than what he expects to see. Something changed, he says. He says this without preamble, without softening it. The directness of a very young man who doesn't yet know that directness is sometimes unkind. Several things changed, you say. He nods, picks up his brush. It's in the eye, he says. The quality I was looking for, it's different now. Different how? He looks at you again, studies. There is no self-consciousness in his looking. It has none of the weight of how other people at this court look at you. He's looking at a visual problem, assessing colour and light and form. More certain, he says finally. Something removed. You think about this. Paint it then, you say. He paints. The 2 hours of the sitting pass in the specific quality of time that painting sessions have, which is slower than regular time and more comfortable. Something about the sustained attention of being looked at without judgment, without agenda, purely as a visual object to be rendered accurately. You can think during a sitting. You think about the encyclopédie, and about your brother's orchards, and about the classification of marine life, and about 240 additional volumes on the east wall. You think about the word Jean Honoré used, more certain. You turn it over, this word, in the slow time of the sitting. At 40 years old, in the middle of everything shifting and the grief of it, and the long, hard work of what comes next, there is underneath all of that something that you can only call certain. A bedrock thing. Not what you have, what you are. The person you have become through 11 years of the hardest kind of paying attention, the kind that requires you to know yourself accurately in order to know everything else accurately. You know who you are. You know what you think and why you think it. You know what you value and what you've built and what you intend to keep building. You know what you will and will not do to maintain your position, and where the lines are that you've never crossed, not because you couldn't, but because crossing them would change what you're defending into something not worth defending. You know the difference between what you've earned and what was given to you. You know which parts of your life are real. This is not consolation, but it is solid. It is the kind of solid that you can stand on when the things around you are less solid. The session ends. Jean Honoré steps back from the canvas. You stand and cross to where he's standing, and you look at the painting, and the eye is right. The eye is finally exactly right. There is in the painted eye the specific quality of a woman looking at something and seeing it clearly, without the distortion of hope or fear, with a particular combination of intelligence and feeling that sees both accurately, and that has spent long enough doing it to be no longer surprised by what it finds. You look at this eye for a long time. Yes, you say. He nods. One more session, he says. Just to look, to see if there's anything to adjust. When? Next week, Tuesday. You agree. Tuesday. You walk back through the corridors with that painted eye in your mind, that particular expression on a face that is yours, and you think that being seen accurately is one of the rarer things available to a person, and that you are lucky to have it. At least here, at least in this room, at least in the 8-inch canvas that lives in the deep drawer of the rosewood desk. The months have their seasons. You know this about time at Versailles, that it is experienced in rhythms larger than a single day, that there are seasons to the political year and seasons to the personal year, and that surviving in this place requires you to know which season you're in and to manage yourself accordingly. You've been in a transitional season, the season of change and adjustment and the long, careful work of repositioning. You are moving through it. November brings cold. The palace heats itself with 1,000 fires, and still the corridors have a bite in them, the stone and marble that absorbs the summer warmth, releasing it grudgingly. The wind off the gardens finding the gaps in the windows that the summer curtains concealed. You put on the heavier dresses. You keep a wrap at your desk. Your breath fogs slightly in the library until the morning fire is properly caught. The library is more than halfway complete. Leblanc has finished the east and north walls. The west wall is in progress, the shelves going up with the speed and precision that reflects the fact that the craftsmen have now done this twice before and know what they're doing. The south wall will be last, and it will hold the manuscripts and the rare books and the things that require the glass case and the controlled light, and that section is still being planned in detail because getting it wrong is not an option. You have been acquiring books for 18 months, not randomly, with a specific program, a vision of what this library is for and who will use it and what it will contain. The natural philosophy collection is strong, stronger than you'd expected it to be when you started, because the networks of people you know have proven very useful at locating things you couldn't find through ordinary channels. The literature section is growing. The history section is the one that needs the most work, not because there aren't enough history books, but because the history books that exist are mostly wrong about the important things. Too concerned with kings and battles, and not at all concerned with the people who actually made the world function. You've been trying to find books that correct this. Some of them don't exist yet. You've written to 4 writers suggesting they should exist. 3 of them are thinking about it. 1 of them has started. This is how things get made. Someone has to notice the gap. On a Tuesday in November, you go to see Jean Honoré for the last session, and when you arrive, the painting is finished. Not just nearly finished in the way it has been nearly finished for months. Finished. He has done something to the background in the final session, a subtle adjustment, and the effect is that the figure at the desk exists in a quality of light that feels true. Morning light, cool and clear and undeceived, and the figure exists in it with exactly the kind of presence you've been trying to explain for 11 years is available to a woman who decides to be fully herself. You look at the painting for a very long time. There are no other words that are right for this moment, so you don't look for other words. What will you do with it? He asks. Keep it, you say. It should be seen. It will be. Eventually. He wraps it carefully. You carry it yourself back to your apartments, holding it with both hands, the new wrapping crinkly and clean. The painting goes in the drawer, not because you want to hide it, because it's yours, completely and privately yours. Not a court document, not a political instrument, not a statement or a position or a signal, just you. The evening of the painting is a good evening. You eat supper alone, which you do sometimes, not as a statement but simply because the evening calls for it. because there are days when you want the quiet of your own company at your own table, with good food, and the particular comfort of not needing to manage anyone else's experience. The fire is well built. The food is simple and good. You have a glass of wine and you read the Marine Life Treatise, the section about cephalopods, which you are finding almost unreasonably interesting. These creatures with their distributed intelligence and their remarkable adaptability and their ability to survive in conditions that should be impossible, and that are not impossible because they have spent millions of years learning to be something other than what their circumstances suggested they should be. You read about octopuses for an hour, then you go to your desk and you write 2 more letters, then you go to bed. The palace at night has sounds you only hear in winter, the sounds of a cold building working against the cold, the particular creak and settle of ancient stone contracting, the moan of wind in the chimney flues, the occasional percussion of a shutter someone has failed to secure properly knocking in the draught. These sounds are not frightening. They are familiar. They are the building's version of breathing. You lie in the dark and the building breathes around you. Tomorrow there is a morning reception and a meeting with a new potential acquisition, a collection of botanical manuscripts that a family in Lyon is willing to sell, and that would be extremely valuable for the library's natural philosophy section. There is a letter to write to the London natural philosopher about his optics problem, which you've been thinking about and have developed a theory about, probably wrong but interesting enough to be worth putting forward. There is the dinner with Marville on Thursday to discuss the situation with the Academy, which has been quiet since the confrontation with Madame de Vaufour, but which has not gone away and which requires ongoing management. There is also, on Friday, a small event at which the King will be present, not the formal event, an informal one, the kind of gathering that used to happen often and has happened less frequently in the past year, a small group of people in a private room, good conversation, the King among them as a person rather than as a function. You have been invited. This is not nothing. You note it as not nothing, and you do not read more into it than the thing itself, which is that you have been invited and you will go. You think about what to wear on Friday, which is a fully legitimate thing to think about, a problem with a real solution that requires knowing certain things about colour and light, and the room and the people who will be there, and the specific kind of impression that serves your purposes best, which is not the impression of a woman competing or performing, but the impression of a woman who is simply and completely herself. This has always been your best impression. This has, in the long run, been more effective than any other strategy available to you, simply being yourself, fully and specifically and without apology. 40 years old, 11 years at this court, a library half built and a portrait in a drawer and 240 additional volumes on the east wall, and a letter started to a natural philosopher about the refraction of light in water. Simply yourself. The wind knocks the loose shutter. Then it doesn't. Then it does. Your eyes are heavy. The fire in the grate has gone down to coals, casting that familiar red glow across the ceiling, making the shadows move like water. Tomorrow is full of things. But it is tomorrow. Right now it is just this. The warmth of the bed and the sound of the building and the dark behind your eyes. You're not afraid. This is a genuine thing. You tested it carefully, this feeling of not being afraid. Tested it against the grief and the 14 months of arithmetic and the look across the dinner table and the morning mirror and the corridor confrontation and all of the instruments of fear that this palace reliably deploys against the people who live in it. And underneath all of that, underneath the calculations and the careful performances and the grief, you are not afraid. You are 40 years old and still here and still yourself, and still building things that matter, and still capable of spending an hour reading about cephalopods and finding it completely fascinating. That is something. That is, in fact, a great deal. The shutter goes still, the fire settles, the palace breathes. Your thoughts drift in the particular way they drift when the day has released its grip, the way the specific items on tomorrow's list lose their edges and become general things, colour and shape rather than words, and the plans and letters and the arithmetic of visits dissolve into something softer and less urgent. Let it come. Let the day release. Let the morning receptions and the corridor encounters and the careful distances of dinner tables become simply what they are, which is a life. One specific and particular life being lived in a remarkable and difficult place by a woman who is more than the sum of what the difficult place requires of her. The library in the morning, Leblanc and the west wall shelves, the quality of the afternoon light on the spines of the natural philosophy collection, all those books in their argument, each one speaking to the ones beside it. The letter to London about the refraction of light, the painting in the drawer, the gladness, the specific, unstrategic, inalienable gladness of an October afternoon in a room you've made, in work you love, in yourself, that stays. All of the rest of it moves and shifts and requires management, but that stays. That is what you take into the dark and the warmth and the slow collapse of thought that is sleep. The church bells somewhere across the dark gardens ring, very faint, very far, one then silence. The wind outside, the coals, your breathing, which has found its own slow rhythm now. The person you are becoming is not finished yet. At 40, you're still in the middle of becoming, which used to seem like a problem, and now seems like the best possible thing. To still be unfinished, to still be capable of finding cephalopods fascinating, and of arguing for 20 minutes with a mathematician, and of writing 12 pages to Paris about Voltaire because you genuinely wanted to say those 12 pages, and someone was finally asking to still be here, still paying attention, still building. Centuries from now, the rooms you walk will be walked by people who don't know your name, and the light will come through the same windows at the same angles, and somewhere in that building there will be books that exist because you wanted them to exist. Ideas that continued because you put your name behind them. Arguments you helped make possible between people who changed how France thought. They won't know you did it. That's all right, you know. The night is very quiet now, the building very still. Let sleep take you the way it takes everyone eventually, without ceremony, without calculation, without the long, careful arithmetic of position and presence and the management of absence. Let the mind close its many files. Let the hand rest, the writing hand, the hand that has been going since before 5 this morning, and that will go again tomorrow, and that is, according to a painter 29 years old, finally right, finally itself, finally captured in the quality of knowing its work so completely that the knowing lives in the body, your hand, your work, your library, yourself, warm enough, safe enough, certain enough. Let the dark do what the dark does. Let the hours pass in peace. You've earned this rest. Take it. And in the library, in the dark, the books stand in their rows, the argument they make patient and permanent, waiting for morning and the first clean light of whatever comes next. Good night.